Welcome to the Liberty Lobbyist, where we teach you political lessons from the purple state of New Hampshire so you can advocate for liberty no matter where you live. I'm Melissa Blasek. I am a former New Hampshire state representative and a current executive director and lobbyist for a grassroots liberty organization called Rebuild NH. Oh boy, I've been very busy. I spent the entire day watching the Senate yesterday in New Hampshire in their gallery, because I was highly, highly concerned about a top priority bill. And I'm going to tell the little story about why I was concerned, what I did about it, and what the result was. Okay, so I've had a bill that is now headed to the governor's desk for the third time. It has been twice vetoed by the previous governor. This is new governor, hoping, new governor, new chances, right? Okay. And the bill prohibits public school mask mandates. It originally passed both chambers in 2022. That was a really tough time because people were still masking. Schools still had mask mandates. This would have effectively ended in place school mask mandates. And of course, doing anything that's actually going to change something in that moment is always harder. And people were still very mask crazy. I flew in Stephen Petty for both hearings in both chambers. Got through the House very narrowly because we had very narrow Republican majority, but it passed and got to the Senate. Senate's always a problem in New Hampshire, but the Senate majority leader was the head of the committee. And after Stephen Petty's testimony, he said something I'd never heard him say before. He said that was the most compelling testimony I have ever heard on any subject. And he really, he and I don't agree on a lot of things, but he really went to bat for that bill, and it passed and it got vetoed. Okay. It got put in again last year. Again, with that, at that time, it just whizzed through the House and the Senate. No problem. Everyone just voted for it, done. And vetoed again. This time should have whizzed through the House and the Senate again because everyone already agrees to it, right? Like, we've all been voting for this bill. We all agree to it. And especially in the Senate, it's not really new people. So it's like everyone agrees already. And yet it actually should have passed the Senate on the consent calendar. For people who don't know the difference, consent calendar is like a package of bills where in the committee, like, everyone agreed to it in the committee, either to pass or fail. And so it gets put on the consent calendar, and all the calendar gets voted on by one voice vote one time. So that bill, even the Democrats in the committee agreed that it can be passed on the consent calendar. So it was on the consent calendar. I'm watching this thing, and the next Senate session, they pulled it off the consent calendar and special ordered it to June 5th. What does special order means? It means that they decided that they're not going to take it up and vote on it as a body until June 5th. I lost my mind because I know what that means. Especially if you remove a bill from the calendar and you send it to June 5th, June 5th also happens to be the deadline for both the chambers to act on all bills. What that means is they want to add things to it. They think that this is a House priority and that they are going to tack on bills that the House killed of theirs to this one. And I lost my mind. I sent the Senate Majority Leader, who's a different person now, a text. She never responded to me, saying, there is no way that you could have done this and not expected to hear from me about this. Of all bills to choose, this is one that is too personal to too many people. I have bled for this bill. That bill was finally going to get signed, hopefully, and it should have passed on the consent calendar as just a clear signal to the governor that enough is enough. It needs to be signed. I can't believe that you did this. Don't you dare touch that bill. And pretty much, I was not much nicer than that. Okay. I started a whole campaign to her office. I sent out, call Senator Birdsell and tell her not to amend the mask bill. Tell her to pass the clean mask bill. I mean, the sponsor and I are calling every senator. Are you amending it? No one believes anybody. Why are you holding this? It was a whole thing. We went so bananas about this. I sat in the Senate. The Senate started their session at 1 o'clock. They did not get to that bill until 8 o'clock. About an hour before they got there, they were taking a break again because they take so many breaks in the Senate. And the Senate president looks up at me and she's like, "What are you still doing here?" I'm like, "I'm waiting for the mask bill." And she's like, "Oh, wait, that's going to be fine." I said, "It better be fine. It better be not amended." Well, it did pass unamended. So, why did they do this? Well, I believe that they did intend to amend it, but then I made such a big stink, and everyone made such a big stink out of it that they were like, "Oh, we can't amend it." So instead, they took other bills and amended those, one of which I'm quite unhappy about, but it's less important than this one. So I'm like, all right, well, it is what it is. Um, but that is how this happens, by the way, in every legislative body in America. Both chambers start playing games with each other over their priorities that the other side may be killed, where they start adding them on and creating omnibus bills. So at least they didn't do that with the mask bill. Uh, we have a jam-packed day to talk just about political activism. I feel like I haven't done a pure activism show in a long time. This one is, if you want to like get nuts and bolts and understand how things work, this is the show for you. But before we get there, ever wonder why your brain feels foggy even when you're eating clean and exercising? It might not be burnout, it could be parasites. Groundbreaking research from Dr. Alan McDonald revealed a direct link between chronic parasite infections and neurological diseases like multiple sclerosis. Parasites can cause inflammation, nerve damage, and long term cognitive decline. More reason to do a full body cleanse at least once a year. The Wellness Company has a solution for you. Ivermectin plus membendazole. These drugs, and I have a really hard time pronouncing them. The gold standard parasite solution now combined in one cleanse combo, designed to eliminate harmful invaders and support your immune system naturally. Medical grade, not some trendy herbal gimmicks. Fill out a quick intake form and get a 3-month supply shipped straight to your door. Maha is officially here, and the Wellness Company is making hard to get medications digitally accessible so that you can live your best life. Head to dailyclout.health and use code dailyclout to save $60 off plus free shipping on all orders. Cleanse your body today. Welcome to the Liberty Lobbyist, J.R. Hoell. Great to have you.
Good to be here.
So, JR, I like to tell people that you taught me everything I know about political activism.
I hope that's a good thing.
Well, it depends on who you're talking to, probably. But even though we've been friends for quite a few years now, I don't actually know how an engineer like yourself got involved in politics. Can you start there?
Sure. So I transplanted from New Jersey in '93, fell in love with the state after graduate school, and stayed around and started a company in '99. And I watched the BET go from 0.25%, this is the business enterprise tax, to 0.5% to 3/4. And I got up and said, "This is killing me. I got to do something." So living in Milford, I ran for office because obviously it's time to fix a broken government if in a very short couple year period, I think it was about 5 years total, the business enterprise had ratcheted up 300%. So my first goal was to ratchet it back down, and we're back down to, what is it, 0.5% right now, I think. And the thresholds for filing for small companies are much higher. So that's what got me involved. And then I started doing Second Amendment stuff in the 2005, 2006 time period, and I learned most of what I know relative to political activism at that point.
Well, so now we met during COVID, very early on in COVID.
Yep.
And you are one of the original founders of Rebuild NH, but you have founded quite a few different organizations, have you not?
So founded or co-founded, right? So
Yes.
in the political realm, myself and several others, I'm not sure anybody's still in the House, formed the Natural Rights Caucus. There was former members like Honorable John Burt and Honorable Andrew Manous and Dan Tamburello and a bunch of others. And that was the 2010 class, per se, right? The 2011-12 legislative year. And there was 6 or 7 of us, Honorable George Lambert, that comes to mind, that formed this Natural Rights Caucus, and that comes out of our Constitution, that our rights, right, come from God, and we have their natural rights. And the Constitution clarifies and documents that in part first. And then as it structures a government, it tries to respect them. And in many cases it does. But as we saw during the COVID crisis, quote unquote, or the COVID lockdowns, during many Second Amendment battles, during various family and education battles, government oversteps its bounds. So we formed a caucus to try and push back against the mainstream Republicans to protect our rights.
Right.
So there's that one.
Were you a founder of New Hampshire Firearms Coalition?
No. So I was not one of the founders. That was formed in 2003. I joined as a member in the 6 or 7 time period. I think I ended up on the board in 2008 or 9. I don't remember. Been there for a long time.
And how many terms have you done in the House?
I've done 5 terms. 5 terms too many. Sorry. It's a lot of work. And for those who really want to get involved, it will swallow up whatever time you throw at it, because it truly is a volunteer job.
And you tend to overcommit, I've noticed.
Fair point, right? So my last term, I was in the House and on House Finance, and I also took on a leadership role in the House Republican Alliance, took on a leadership role in the House Freedom Caucus, still stayed on the board for Rebuild, Reopen, and stayed on the board for NHFC. And to top it off, I joined the Republican, what do you call it, the NHGOP as a vice chair. So yes, overcommitting was a problem that year.
You kept saying that, well, now you're doing this, now you're doing this. And I'm thinking, I know you have a job. Like,
yes, on top of that, right. So as I said, it will take whatever you throw at it. But learn some valuable lessons, right? And it is possible, and I think this is an important lesson for your listeners. It is important when doing policy to not give up on principle and be pragmatic. And you'll see this with Representative Thomas Massie and Senator Rand Paul and some others. Representative Thomas Massie voted for the debt increase last time because it automatically forced a cut to spending.
Yes.
There is no such thing in this. There is no, right? There's a $5 trillion debt limit increase in here, $1 million there. And right at the end of the day, there's no mandatory cuts in spending. So of course he's not voting for it. No surprise. The only Republican who did it. So it is possible to be pragmatic about throwing in things that actually are structural cuts or changes in the paradigm, and vote on those. And like the same thing could be true in some of our bills going through the House and Senate this year, right? Why the budget doesn't have the revenues are below 2024 in New Hampshire. That's a proven thing. We're $200 million in state revenue below 2024's year-to-date numbers. We're 11 months into the cycle, so basically we're through the final year of the budget cycle, and we're underperforming from 2 years ago. And we want to build a budget that spends more? Hello. So what you do is you build a structural cut in there that if we start to see revenues that are underperforming because our estimates are too high, it mandates cuts to whatever. Now, that's how you do it. And then you haven't cut it, but the trigger mechanism has been put in.
You brought up Thomas Massie, and the criticism I see of him very often from sort of laymen is that he's, by always saying no, you're not accomplishing anything. Okay. Can you explain why that is an irrational statement?
So it takes one person to start the effort to oppose something. Someone has to be first. Someone has to say, guess what? It isn't good enough. You saw that with Massie, right, on the budget. The budget's not good enough. And then you start to see the Chip Roys. It's really not good enough. And then the Rand Paul started echoing in that. And lo and behold, front page news everywhere yesterday was Elon Musk. This bill sucks,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the nationwide divorce of the dads is going on right now. By the way, two dad families don't work. We just learned that. um, anyway, the and more people are starting to recognize the big beautiful budget isn't big. Well, it is big, but it isn't beautiful, and it is going to hurt us. And if I posted the other day, I said we're probably at the point now you should just pour gasoline on the fire and let it burn itself right out completely. And those of us who saw that this was coming will end up being able to rebuild out of the ashes, because it is a hockey shaped curve in a very short period of time. The interest alone will consume our GDP, and then we're done.
I think what I'm always trying to explain to people is, even let's say he was the only person who stood and he didn't end up getting a ball rolling that moved forward, it's still his role, by being the principled person, is to sound the alarm. Even if it seems like he's just screaming into the wind, that is the point. And if you don't have anybody like that,
Mhm.
that is when the same thing continues to happen in the same cycle over and over again. So yeah, maybe you're accomplishing something, but you're accomplishing more of the
Oh,
same. And I think you and I have talked so much about this over the years. In years gone by, we didn't have the Thomas Massey in the New Hampshire House, but then eventually we got a few of them, and they built upon each other and they sounded the alarm. And for a while, they didn't accomplish anything, okay, in
right.
that they were not the ones there that had the numbers to pass the types of bills that they wanted to pass. But being the stalwart, being the one screaming into the wind, standing in the way, putting the barrier up, is what eventually over time moved the needle. And now the New Hampshire House arguably has one of the best makeups of any legislative body for
Absolutely.
liberty in the country. Now, we haven't been able to really get that going in the Senate in New Hampshire yet. And that's why the New Hampshire Senate operates very much like most Republican legislative bodies in the country, unfortunately. But we're trying.
Well, we're trying, and at the end of the day, going back to the Patriot Act, right? 2001 era, 2002, whenever it went through, Rand Paul was one of the few.
He was.
Sorry, Ron Paul was one of the few who said no, right?
He was so right.
He was so right. Everybody recognizes it now, right? But he was so right back then. He's been calling on us to reform how much we spend in government for years. It's broken. The Federal Reserve is broken. And pretty soon we're going to find out those of us who thought about trying to plan ahead for a financial crisis are going to be in better shape than those who just went along for the ride. Um, we are seriously in debt. And oh, by the way, the state isn't doing any better. The state is following blindly down that same path. You asked about what organizations I helped found, right? The New Hampshire House Freedom Caucus was one of those, and it was over a debt. Sorry, it was over a budget. And the year we formed it, the budget died in the House because it was so bad. And honestly, the budget's still bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Well,
Senate isn't as bad as they have historically, but there's still things like we're going to take services this year and we're going to pay for them in the next budget cycle because we
right.
don't want to. Okay.
Right.
We're going to push off payment by 1 month or one day so that it's in the next budget cycle. Well, once you start doing that, you're kicking the can down the road. We can't afford it now. We will require contractors to deliver services and we'll promise to pay them in the future.
Yep.
And that's where our federal government is, and the state is quickly following down that same path. Guess what? We have to cut some spending.
No, I agree. So let's talk about guns. Let's talk
Sure.
about guns. How and why did you get involved with New Hampshire Firearms Coalition?
I happen to like the Second Amendment. I studied enough of history to know what happens when governments collect the guns and they're the only ones with them, where that ends up. So did not want that. Saw it in Germany, saw it in China. It's right. There's lots of places where government has collected all the firearms, and then the end result was really bad. Heck, Let's look at the UK, right? First it was, we'll ban the firearms, and then it was something like, we're going to start banning knives, and now you can't post a meme without getting arrested in some cases. So it goes downhill pretty quickly, and that's what prompted me to get involved. Recently, and I think I told you about this on the phone, Congress was pushing this big, beautiful budget through, and a bunch of us as gun owners from various gun groups across the country said, hey, we should write a letter to Congress and see if we can get the Hearing Protection Act, which is to pull suppressors. They're not firearms. They're just mufflers that go on the end of firearms. They don't make them quiet like the movies portray. All they do is take hearing damaging level noise and make it less damaging, so that you can fire with hearing protection and not damage your ears. Let's pull them out of the National Firearms Act, and let's see if we can also get short barrel rifles and some other things. So we created a letter to Congress. It was signed by close to 100 or slightly over 100 either gun groups or legislators across the country. And now we're doing the same thing to the Senate. There's a website, reformnfanow.com. And people who want to see the letter and what we're doing, signed by a bunch of gun groups, and to get updated every couple days. We'll update a new PDF of who's co-signed onto the letter, and then we'll send it to them when the Senate is ready to act on that bill.
Fantastic.
So
I know, I love that. And so let's talk, I always say Republicans do get what they fight for. Okay.
yeah,
And the problem is they don't fight for enough things. Right. We have not really been fighting for fiscal responsibility, which is how we are in the mess that we are on, in for that. Historically, we have not necessarily fought for a lot, except for on a national scale, like as far as building an activism movement. Right. And
right.
in my opinion, there is a national activism movement on two subjects: abortion and guns. And probably taxes. I mean, we're very good at abortion, guns, and taxes, right? Except the problem is we're good at cutting taxes. We're not good at cutting spending, but that's another thing. So,
Right.
But there are great big organizational networks of gun groups nationally and pro-life groups nationally.
That's on the right. On the left, you've got the whole teacher unions and
Oh,
unions.
no, I mean, the left are fantastic at activism and
Yes.
across the board on almost every subject that they even
Oh,
purport to care about.
oh, absolutely. I mean, you see people all the time show up in rainbow colors at the State House demanding that kids get access to surgical procedures as minors to chop off healthy body parts. It's really bad.
No,
And
and
but
and that's the
they'll fill a
thing.
room.
They don't cede any ground. There are people like that show up in all 50 state legislatures in America. They don't care how deep red that state is. They will
Yep.
do that in Alabama just like they do it in New York, and it does
Yep.
not matter to them. That's how organized they are. They've
Yep.
actually created a culture on the left. It's like an activism culture, right?
Mhm.
And the right has really struggled to do that historically, particularly at the state level, in my opinion. New Hampshire really is an exception, but
Second.
nationally, even I see it on two subjects and two subjects only, and we've made a lot of progress, right? I mean, Dobbs was obviously like the ultimate on that subject, and now in with guns over the years, even
Oh, yeah.
especially the state levels, we've made huge strides. I mean, constitutional carry just not that long ago was something that people would just balk at, and now
Mhm.
how many states have constitutional carry?
We're at 29, I think, at this point, or something. 28 or 29.
The
Exactly.
majority.
Right. So there was a point when I submitted that bill in New Hampshire. It had first submitted in 2004, and then it ended up, I submitted it every year, starting in basically, or every term at least, starting in 2010, until Senator Bradley said, I'll prime it. It's obvious you guys care about this issue, and it got done, right? In 2017, first bill signed. So it is, and the language had been adopted in terms of, right, by one body for a while, but it took, and this mask bill, right? You can get a bill through one side, but getting it through the second body sometimes is hard.
Or getting
And
it
but
signed by the governor. My ban on public school mask mandates is now going to go. It's headed to the governor for the third time.
right,
But yeah, no, these things do take time. Also, I think another really good lesson out of that is perseverance is key. I
oh yeah,
have learned that if you just keep hammering the same bill home, eventually you wear them down. Like, by the way, I didn't tell you this yet, JR, but I just heard like a rumor right before we started here that the senators are actually begging the governor to sign the mask bill. And it is not because they care about this issue whatsoever. It is because they are sick to death of hearing about it. I
Right.
got a bill that I've had vetoed a couple of times. Well, one time, but been through the House a whole bunch of times. I got to throw on the consent calendar this time
Yeah,
because the
no,
Democrats on the committee were literally worn down.
right. So politics. And I actually thought about writing this book, right? The rules of politics or the principles of politics when it comes to physics. And you think about the laws of physics. Inertia, right, works. It works about policy. It works about bills, right? If something's in motion, it tends to keep in motion. It takes a lot of work to get it started. But once you can get it started, and if you keep on putting effort into it, at some
Right.
point it does finally break through all the obstacles and becomes law. So
Yep.
there's a lot of similarities between the laws of physics and the laws of politics.
Hmm.
Um, and you're right, we do need to do a better job building groups. And I would encourage people, build groups, right? Figure out how to network. Don't tend to take a pro-life network and say, oh, you're good on life issues, so you'll be good on taxes. That doesn't work. Don't take
Hmm.
a Second Amendment group and say, oh, you're good on the Second Amendment, you'll be good on the First. That doesn't work. Tried that once. Um, that's a lesson. You have to build an issue-based organization.
Yes.
And you're right. Guns. We've done that really well across all the states. I'm now in contact with like 30 different state leaders across the country. Yes, we have national groups, but the power of having a bunch of state groups who talk to each other is even better.
Yes.
So,
So let's talk about some of the national groups. I think for a lot of people who maybe aren't super into Second Amendment issues, they probably care about, just the
right,
general right to bear arms, but they're probably
right,
not, maybe as
right,
engaged. A lot of people believe I think because of the left's demonization of it, but that the NRA is like the end all be all
right.
organization. What do you think about the NRA?
The NRA is the largest organization in terms of dollars. Their downside is they have taken the road of, well, we can only get so much, and they become the voice piece or the mouthpiece of the politicians back to the grassroots activists. GOA, Regulars of America, tends to say, where do we need to be? Let's go there.
Mhm.
And I'm strongly in support of them. They take a very principled
They are.
view. There's several others. What I have seen recently is some of the legal groups on the Second Amendment, the firearms, what is it? The firearm FPC is making huge headway in legal battles. Right, National Association of Gun Rights has an arm that's doing legal battles. They were the ones who took the forced reset trigger case and made headway. So there are different um, there are different legal groups now who are pushing, ever since Heller, effectively, to push legal battles, which is exactly what the left did. The left did it on the abortion subject. They did it on other education things. They went through the law, the legal process.
Yes, yes. No, that's a really good point. So that's
Firearms Policy Coalition. That's who I was thinking of. So I'm not a member of them, but they've done some great work from what I can see.
why is it that you think that uniquely there is a national movement on two subjects on the right, abortion and guns. Why is it that we haven't been able to really create that on any other issue?
I don't know. I don't think anybody's been motivated to do that on any other issue.
Mm.
Um, and I think there's lots of room. I think there's a lot of room on education choice. You're starting to see that.
Yes, that is
Okay,
new,
that is getting there. We're seeing across the country.
and the money is getting behind it.
Right, the education choice. You've got various tax groups that are working. Americans for Tax Reform, which was a group started years ago, didn't necessarily make headway. They were at the national level, but never made headway at the state level. There's the U.S. House Freedom Caucus that recently decided in the last couple of years to create a state group of House Freedom Caucuses
Yeah,
and to try and
I think the State Freedom Caucus Network is, um, probably the best thing that we have going in state legislatures. Like they've done the most to change the culture
Right.
in a lot of these red states that we've ever seen
Right. So
before.
you're starting to see some of this happen.
Hmm.
Um,
That's
but
true.
historically, conservatives, broadly speaking, supported guns, life, and taxes, or whatever. Right? They,
Yeah.
they were all aligned on those three issues. But I think you're going to start to see it in the medical freedom area, and that's a big opportunity. And I'm glad that there are groups. Dr. Mary, what is it, Bowden,
Natalie
out of
Bowman. Yep.
Texas, has done a great job. Some others have done a great job building networks
Yep.
and getting the word out.
Yep.
Died suddenly. There's a lot going on.
I think the
And
reason why I think, yes, medical freedom as an issue is growing in activism. It was, I mean, before COVID, it's not to say that there wasn't medical freedom activism. There was, but they were always just sort of marginalized as the crazy anti-vaxxers. I can't say that I paid a lot of attention to it before COVID, and I think we all learned, wow, they're really coming for us all. It's not just like this little
yeah,
niche issue. And but I think, the thing with that issue is that historically it's not a partisan issue. There were
yeah.
plenty of people in the health freedom movement way before COVID who were on the left, especially sort of like those, like, I don't know, kind of like the old hippie kind of types, that kind of. So it really, I think, maybe even kind of originated in that kind of
Oh,
area, and
I
now it's
think it
shifted
did.
over.
And while you're running your business or funding your mission or managing your portfolio, you should be aware that lawmakers are writing rules that could wipe you out overnight or harm your clients or your property or your community. Legisector is your early warning system. Whether you're a small business owner tracking new tax codes, or a nonprofit watching for grant changes, or an investor scanning for regulatory shifts, Legisector keeps you informed in real time. Search bills by keyword, industry, or issue, state and federal, and get a dedicated legislative portal for your industry, ranging from cannabis to infrastructure, family issues, hedge funds, taxes, accounting, mortgages, real estate, 15 different sectors. Legisector gives you the edge to pivot, plan, and protect what you've built. Go to legisector.com and start tracking legislation before it tracks you. Sign up for a free 30-day trial now. Thank you.
And it has moved over. And I do think the Make America Healthy Again movement, right, and all of the similar movements in the health freedom domain are gaining ground
Yeah.
because as a parent, I saw the change in one of my kids relative to vaccinations. I wrote it off as whatever. That was 25 years ago. You look back and you go, wow, I wish I'd made a different choice. And once a parent gets involved and they realize, oh, this impacted our family, they're in. It's a big issue for them. And we're
Mhm.
starting to see people waking up. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't take vaccinations. I'm not an anti-vaxxer per se. I am one. Be careful. Don't do multiple dose shots because there is zero testing done on multiple dose shots, or multiple drug shots all combined together. Right? If you're going to do vaccinations, do them strategically, right, in single dose vials. And that's not how our government buys them. We had that discussion last week. I don't know the answer to what happened on that bill, but we're going to spend $16 million to buy multiple type
State
vaccinations
of New
and,
Hampshire. Yeah.
and then quote give them out or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, I've got real concerns about it because a lot of that money just might be waste.
Well, yes. I think um what I came to realize the more I thought about medical freedom as an issue is, for those of us who care about liberty, it's almost astounding that we didn't always think about this, because I can think just the idea of mandating vaccines for school attendance, which every state in the country does. We ceded that ground to liberty so long ago, like decades and decades ago, and
Oh,
no one ever thought anything of it. We all just were like, oh, okay. And what ground we lost for liberty just with that one move decades and decades ago.
oh, absolutely. And I will say the homeschooling movement, you're talking about movements on the right that have done really well. The homeschooling movement is one of those. The parents who have decided, I'm going to give up the second career, I'm going to invest it in my kids instead. That subculture has done amazingly well. The kids are outperforming their peers significantly. I mean, as a proud dad moment, right? I've got 3 kids, 2 of which have graduated college. A third is entering her junior year. Um, the first one paid for school himself. The second one paid for school himself. And the third one has written the check for junior year and is working on senior year tuition, working 2 jobs, right? That's the work ethic of the homeschool movement. And it's come a long way.
It
This
has.
is
I
right.
don't know if you know that I was homeschooled. Did you know I was homeschooled when I
I
was a
did not
kid?
know that. No.
Yeah, so I was homeschooled when I was a kid. And I always say, like, I was homeschooled in the stone age of homeschooling. Okay. It was the
Well, no,
Wild West,
I did not. Yeah, I did not know that. But like my my second son graduated with a 4.0. My first son graduated with a 3.91, and my daughter has a 3.96. I think she has 1 A minus or something at this point.
Oh yeah,
Like,
I graduated at the top of my class from college too,
yeah.
and I felt so much more prepared for college than any of my public school friends were because I was very used to like working independently. Now I think, yeah, let's talk a little bit about the homeschooling movement. That's an interesting, a lot of people don't think about that as a political issue, but it is a political issue. It wasn't that long ago that homeschooling was illegal, right?
It wasn't that long ago, and I think it was 2012. I don't remember. Up until then, you had to keep and turn in your portfolios to your local school district, turn in your assessments. We had requirements
That's
that
here in New
homeschool.
Hampshire, but yes,
Yeah, no, here in New Hampshire, right? We had
yep,
to turn in. We had a requirement that the kids at least get 40% proficiency,
yep.
okay, on an annualized evaluation. Okay. By the way, there was no such requirement for the kids in public school.
Mhm.
We eventually got that one killed. I helped get the bill passed that got rid of the turning in evaluations. I'm like, the school principals aren't doing anything with this stuff. This is just a waste of their time.
Mhm.
And in general, the academic performance of the homeschool kids is outstanding compared to their public school peers. So it is a great movement. It's come a long way, but you're right. It wasn't that long ago where it was illegal, and the freedom is great. And as more people realize that the government education system is fundamentally broken, we've got great teachers, we've got some really great programs, we've got lots of brick and mortar buildings, but guess what? We're not delivering education very well. And in 2010, I put in a bill because I had an opinion which was not shared, but it might someday be a groundbreaking, oh, yeah, this is a good idea. I said, we beat kids with sticks to get them to school, right? We have truancy laws. If you don't show up, okay, you get punished. And let's get rid of them. Let's
Mhm.
make it such that if kids want to learn, they can go. And now force the schools to deliver something of value. Because ultimately, education is incredibly important. My family and I have benefited personally by having a great education. Um, so if we made the education so valuable, parents jump through hoops to get their kids there, we wouldn't have to, right? The system would reform itself, but we're not there.
Mhm.
So that bill went nowhere.
But see, there has been such an evolution. I saw a picture not that long ago from the 1950s of Amish fathers being handcuffed and dragged off to jail for homeschooling their children, right?
Yep.
And then I was being homeschooled in New Hampshire in the 90s, and yes, we had a lot more requirements than we do now, and a lot of that's due to your work. The movement, obviously, or the amount of homeschoolers has exploded since COVID. I mean, the
Oh,
landscape is so different now. I'm sure you have, even just because of the age of your kids, seen a huge difference in the number of homeschoolers and therefore the number of things available to them that people have created just since your kids were little to now. And I want to make sure that for homeschoolers out there that you understand that you are now part of a political movement, and you have to actually be engaged in that, because as easily as I shouldn't say this, as much as we've made progress, we are always one bill away from sliding backwards. Okay.
Yep.
And there's always more progress to be made. And so I really want people to get involved. I don't know if you've been keeping up. We're in a chat, but we're talking about legislation for next year and potentially making a constitutional amendment
Yep.
to the state constitution, enshrining a parent's right to educate their child. And I think that this is absolutely brilliant. I actually think it's very attainable. I maybe I'm being super optimistic, but I think it's very attainable. I plan on bringing my homeschool group and having the children testify about homeschooling, and because I think it's really important that they understand what's going on and that they're involved in what's going on, right?
Right. Well, and I just pulled up a map from unplannedhomeschooler.com, right? And it shows the by state the current homeschool laws from least regulated to most regulated.
Mhm.
And we live in the Northeast, and no surprise, right? The Northeast is predominantly red. Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont, Massachusetts are all bright red. It's the only
Yep.
red on the right, most regulated on the map.
Mhm.
But Maine and New Hampshire are kind of notification only,
Mhm.
and pretty soon there are some states starting to show up. Even New Jersey is now least regulated, and I think we can do a whole lot better.
I think so
And
too. But
um,
even just since remember when the notification requirement was not a notification, it was an ask for permission with your curriculum outline, and you had to do it every single year. Like my mom was astounded when, because I'm homeschooling now, and she's like, "Wait a minute, you don't have to do that." I'm like, "No," and I'm not asking for permission. I notify them one time, and then that's it. I never hear the. I got a quick story. So in New Hampshire, the law is that you can notify one time until your child wants to go back to school, if ever. And you can either send it to your local school district, to the State Board of Education, or to a private school that is being a participating agency for the state. So I wanted to do a private school, okay? Because I am so paranoid about government. So I called up this school, they take it, whatever. They sent me this email back that I was confused about, but I wanted to make sure I understood the law before I responded. I thought it sounded like they were saying that I had to do this every year. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I don't have to do this
nope,
every
nope,
year.
we changed
And
that.
so I contacted Frank Edelblue, who's the commissioner of education. I said, I'm right? Like, I don't have to do this every year. I just have to do this one time. And he calls me back ready to go to war for me. He's like, is Merrimack making you do it every year? I'm going to call them. And I said, no, it's not that at all. I was just like checking, and it's the private school. And he's like, well, why don't you just file it at the State Board of Education with me? I said, because I don't trust you or the government, Frank.
Nope, I get it.
But it was just
It.
a misunderstanding. They understood the law. I was just, misunderstanding how they read it, but how they
Yeah.
wrote their email. But anyway,
Well, so you're right. We're one bill away, but
yes.
I've heard that for many subjects. Well, what if, right? What if we get rid of HEAC? Oh no. Well, what if we get rid of HEAC? HEAC isn't the thing that stops bad bills. It's homeschoolers showing up in hundreds of, right, with kids in tow at the state house that stop bad bills. It's not
Yes.
HEAC. If there's a bad rule that comes through some process, it's going to be the same group of people showing up to the DOE rules department that will
Thank
shut
you.
it down. I mean, you and I were aware, right? There was the whole vaccine database thing a couple years ago. Okay.
If you're in any other state, you have a vaccine database, and you should be working to make it an opt-in database, because we're one of only 3 states that
Yeah.
actually
So
require proactive opt-in.
so
Go ahead.
we had a meeting at DHHS for the rules discussion of this, and
Fun
it
day.
was standing room only in the hallway to get into the room, right? And there was 200 people sitting in the room, and people all the way around. And we shut down the entire meeting. They
Yep.
never held it.
Yep.
Um,
They never changed the rule, and that is the power of activism. I want to bring up as kind of like a little thing to wrap up here, because we're talking about homeschooling and the power of what stops bad legislation is showing up in numbers. obviously there is a gigantic rift in the homeschooling community. New Hampshire is not unique. This is happening all over the country, where people are starting to bring in school choice legislation. And there are a group of homeschoolers that are vehemently against any type of voucher program. And I understand their concern, because I have for many years shared the concern that, well, if we all start taking money from the government, even though it's your money, that they could start adding strings to it. Well, that's the whole point. But at the end of the day, what I realized was, there is no such thing as a slippery slope. It takes one bill, and one bill only, to change anything at any given time. And it takes a group of people there to stop that from ever happening. So yes, it's true, by the way, not all school choice legislation is good legislation. Just because it has that term, school choice, does not mean it's good. And there's some very bad ones. Texas just passed a very bad one. So, so you enact one and you're worried about them adding strings. That's why this is a political movement, folks. You got to show up.
So, and as a homeschool parent, right, with wanting zero strings, just leave RSA 193-A, the homeschool chapter, right, in statute, and say this is always an alternate route. If you want to do this, it's not tied to any other option. It's not tied to any other funding.
Let's explain that for people who don't know. And I think New Hampshire is the only place that has structured it like this. And I when we did it like this, I thought it was absolutely the perfect route. I think that every state should be going this route. So it is not just that everybody who goes to private school or who is a homeschooler can get, like, what we call them education freedom accounts, but whatever your voucher program is. You have to choose to be a voucher student to get an so therefore you are a separate track with a separate statute all to you. And the homeschoolers don't have to take it, and therefore they don't have to ever be involved in that statute. The homeschooling laws as they exist are still all by themselves. And I absolutely think, and I will remain a we just passed universal school choice. It's going to get signed. I'm going to remain a homeschooler. And not be an education freedom account person. That's my choice. But yeah, that is, I think, the way that every state should be structuring, and I believe we're the only state that has.
And just like the homeschool movement, the laws that matter to the families are all in one small place, in one chapter, easy for them to read. Same thing with the Second Amendment. We're down to basically one chapter. There's a couple of places that we have to follow all the legislation, like some of the domestic violence sections and the hunting sections. But for the most part, all of our laws are in one chapter, which makes it easy every year see if this chapter is referenced in any bill. Because, right, a simple repeal something could happen in any one bill, and if it's not caught, you don't want it to go through. So sometimes, right, we have some protections in statute that are actually pretty good. Right? We could delete the license, but then you might, delete our local license, right? And if we got rid of the pistol revolver license, you might trip up a federal law by going onto school grounds or within 1,000 feet of a school. So these things we're very vigilant at protecting.
Yes. No, that's a really good tip for people following bills and legislation. And because, man, it is always better to kill bad legislation than to pass good legislation at the end of the day.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. How can people find you?
Best way to find me is to reach out and send a generic email to nhfirearms.org. There's a contact tab there, and once you do that, it'll get to all the board members, and I can be contacted.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much for coming on.
Sure enough. Take care. Bye.
That's it for the Liberty Lobbyist. I am Melissa Blasek. You can follow me on X at Melissa Blasek NH or at Rebuild NH. Or if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can email me, director@rebuildnh.com. Until next time.